Welcome to Venture, the world of small business and big ideas. We welcome Linda Avey to the program. Forget mapping the stars or the sea. There's plenty of work closer to home. Mapping the human genome.
So, what makes us different from one another?
Let's say you have frizzy curly hair and your siblings have shiny straight hair, and you want to know who you got your frizz from. Or you have a history of diabetes in the family and you want to see how likely you are to get it too. Or say you're this guy and you want to know once and for all if you're related to this guy.
Okay, watch this on American Idol.
Then you may want to seek the help of 23andMe. It's a personal genetics information company founded by Linda Avey with the help of her partner Ann Wojcicki. As a biopharmaceutical industry insider, Avey knew breakthroughs in the field had a broader appeal. Here's how it works. Order a kit, spit in it. Then 23andMe uses up-to-date technology to map your genetic code. The information they come back with can provide insight into why you are the way you are.
Your siblings didn't necessarily get the same versions of your parents' genes that you did.
Clients can find out their risk for common diseases and conditions, such as heart disease. They can also find out about the origin of, say, food preferences or athletic ability, even get details about their ancestry. As for the Buffetts, only time will tell. 23andMe concluded that while there's an off chance Warren and Jimmy are distant cousins, their Y chromosomes are not similar. So don't expect them to bump into each other at the next family reunion.
And Linda joining us today. Thank you so much for coming. So let's start off by talking a little bit just about where this came from. Now, obviously, you'd worked in the industry, and I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you read about your partner, co-founder, Ann Wojcicki, in a book?
That's where I first got an idea about Ann. Yeah, it was in a book called The Google Story, and by David Weiss, who was at the Washington Post. And it was, I loved it because it showed, I think, a really good side of Ann, that she's very provocative and she likes to shake things up, and she's not a traditionalist in any way, which I think is a lot, it's very similar to my personality. So it was fun to read about that, and I was intent on meeting her after reading that.
Explain to our audience what you read and then why you decided this is the woman I want to start this kind of company with.
Well, it wasn't so much that, but it was just that she'd been at a dinner, and they write about this, it's in the last chapter of David's book, that she's at a dinner and she's talking to people, and it's actually about kind of a funny side of the company, where we talk about when you eat asparagus, can you smell it in your urine? And some people can and some people can't, and we don't know why. We figure it's probably a genetic thing. But Ann was going around the table at this dinner asking some very well-known people, you know, whether or not they could smell the asparagus in their pee, as she likes to put it. And so it was interesting that that was included in the book, because it shows the side of genetics that can be really fun and fascinating, and that it's not all scary health stuff, but our genetics are a big part of who we are, and it's really worth, we think, exploring that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the business model here. So you obviously have, and we gave an example of kind of how it works, these samples and what you get from it, but also there's a huge kind of social networking side for genetics and a consumer direct research side. So talk to us a little bit about how it all works.
So it's very simple that, you send in your saliva sample, then we genotype it, which is just a process where we read it at about 600,000 points in the genome. And with every one of those points that we can tell you something, we will do that. And that's what our service provides. And we're updating it every week. We have new features and new stories and new bits of information that we upload. But what we wanted to do in addition to that, it's not just about giving you your information. It's allowing you to find other people who you share interests with, whether it's health related or ancestry related. So we wanted to build that sort of a social networking aspect to the site, which we did, and we've launched that. And now we have people that are joining the communities, as we call them, and they're sharing information, or they're asking questions of each other. And so we have over 1,000 different threads of conversations ongoing now at 23andMe. But then additionally, the research side of what we're doing is really how we can gather additional information from you. In addition to your genetics, you can tell us now about your health. Can you take over-the-counter medications or not? Do you have certain diseases like Parkinson's? And then we have very well-designed surveys to really pull out the information we need to enable the research. But it's very interactive with our customers, and they can opt into whatever surveys they choose to fill out.
When you thought about this, I mean, where did that idea for the business model come from? Say, okay, we want to work like a Facebook, for instance, that connects people from the same school or the same city, but do it from a genetic standpoint. I mean, where did that come from?
Well, it really came from the roles I was having in the companies I worked for, where I was going out and talking to researchers. And the difficulty with doing genetics research, it's not so much the tools and the technologies. We have those. It's really very difficult to assemble large cohorts of people who have a particular trait or disease. It's really hard to get access to them, to reach out to them, hard to pull information out of them. And it seemed like we've got all these social networking tools. Why not apply this to genetics research? So it was really that idea that we can build an online relationship with individuals and get specific bits of information. We can't collect everything. Of course, you can't self-report certain things about your health, but a lot of it you can because you know about yourself. So it's all about creating this web technology to really go hand in hand with the genetics research. And so it was out of frustration that we were not making progress fast enough.
Linda Avey, co-founder of 23andMe. You're watching Venture. We'll be right back. We're talking DNA. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We are with Linda Avey, the co-founder of 23andMe, and we're talking genetics and DNA, talking a little bit about your company. So first, let's bring our viewers in and give us a little genetics history. So how does it exactly work? 23andMe, I felt like I was in biology class looking up again, but talk to us about the name of the company and how these genetics work.
Yeah, so the name has nothing to do with Michael Jordan. We get that question sometimes. But human beings have 23 sets of chromosomes, and that's really where it derives from. And we thought it was kind of a nice twist on things, because not everybody knows that. So that's one that right off the bat, we're kind of informing people that this is because we're a human, the human species, we have this number of chromosomes, and that's what makes us who we are. So the idea of giving people access to this information, we wanted to make sure it was broadly covering the entire genome, because there's little bits of information about things on chromosome 1 and chromosome 10 and 16, so we didn't want to leave any of that out if possible. So.
And you guys, you do genotyping versus sequencing, and I was reading the difference about that. If you could explain that to our audience.
Yeah, genotyping is where you select specific points in the genome to read, and this is because, we're 99.5 or thereabouts similar, all humans are, but it's those points in the genome where we're known to differ that are very interesting to look at and to research. So that's where we can pick out these informational points and read them, and then that becomes this basis for giving you information about your genetics. So in one point in the genome, you might be a CT and I might be a TT, and there could be something to that difference, and that's what we explain.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cost structure. So when you initially started, you were offering these packets. They were about $1,000, correct? And since then, you've really been able to bring the cost down. So first off, when you started the company, I mean, what was your overhead? Like, what were you looking at here? You had to outsource the actual genotyping, correct?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that process. I mean, how did you work through figuring out those overhead costs and how much things were going to cost?
Well, it's all very tied to the technology. So we knew what the technology costs were. We knew what the labor and everything that went into generating this genotype file for an individual. So we just based it on that. It was pretty straightforward, actually. So the reason we were able to drop the price so much was because the technology improvements came through, and we fully anticipated that, and we've always intended to drop the price as the technology costs go down, just so that we can get this out to a broader population, because this really is something about numbers, and the more people we have involved, the better research we'll be able to do.
So where's your profit margin? You guys, you outsource to Illumina, correct? And then how does that relationship work, or where do you guys make your profit then?
So we actually outsourced to LabCorp.
Okay.
We initially worked with Illumina. They make the technology, so they're the experts at making these chips that we use. The chips actually get mailed from Illumina to LabCorp, which is one of the world's largest clinical laboratory testing companies, and they have a CLIA certified laboratory, which it means it's under federal guidelines, and they do the processing. So they have their costs, and then there's the cost for the technology that we get from Illumina, and so it all wraps up into what our costs are, and then of course we put our price out to our customers to enable us to to cover that cost.
Now, are you guys doing any kind of Are you getting any more profits aside from the actual kits that you're selling and those things that you're doing? You also are doing research. People can participate in surveys. And then do you sell that research? Do you provide that data for a fee to certain, I don't know, pharmaceutical companies or any research labs? Or how does that research side of it work from a fee structure?
We do that as well. So that's all done internally, and there's no additional fees that we receive for that right now. And we feel like we have really great expertise in-house to do that. It's a set of skills that not very many people have. A lot of pharmaceutical companies don't even have the bioinformatics and the statisticians and the experts who really know how to dive into the data, and a lot of times they have more math and computer science backgrounds than the science side. So we do all of that right now, and we intend to keep the data at 23andMe to enable that. Where we really look for collaborators is when we're doing a specific survey. Maybe we're going to ask people about MS, multiple sclerosis. We don't internally have experts in that specific disease, so we'll go out to the MS research community and say, you know, we're looking to develop a survey. Could we work with you? And so it's really being able to pull out that information out of our customers where we need the assistance.
Would you ever plan on selling that data, or are there any plans to expand of outsourcing that data somewhere else?
Well, not so much that. We think there will be opportunities for other revenue sources, but for instance, if there's an interest in our customers to be participants in clinical studies, we do think that if we can become the broker of what clinical studies are ongoing and serve up that information to our clients, if they choose to receive it, then they'll become much more aware of what's going on. And if they have a particular disease and they want to hear from a pharmaceutical company doing research in that disease, we can connect them together. And we think there's tremendous value in offering that type of brokering service. So that's something that we see down the road.
So a lot of expansion plans ahead.
Definitely.
We'll talk about that a little bit later, and we'll also talk about how much it would cost perhaps to sequence the DNA. I know that we've been talking about that. So I am here with Linda Avey. She's a co-founder of 23andMe. Stay with us. You're watching Venture, and we're talking DNA. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We're here today with Linda Avey, the co-founder of 23andMe, and we're talking DNA and genetics. And you had talked to me in the last block about the difference between genotyping and actually sequencing DNA. But are there people interested in perhaps having their full DNA sequenced?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we're seeing that now emerging because the technologies are really coming along very quickly. There are all these quote-unquote next-gen sequencing companies who are developing technologies that are just amazing. And we're sort of waiting in the wings to see which technology emerges as sort of the winner, and then we'll definitely transition or offer additional services that would include full sequencing.
And what would something like that cost? I mean, we're talking the genotyping is $399, correct? But I mean, what would it cost to actually sequence your entire...
It depends. It sort of depends on what quality of data do you want. Because if they sequence your genome 10, 15, 20 times and they compile all that data together, the quality of the data is very high, but the cost is very high. So you have to balance the accuracy and the quality of the data against the cost. So there are companies now talking about doing it for $5,000, $1,000. When we see the reality of that, we'll definitely jump on it, because that is definitely where the world is headed.
Now, part of this industry and the business that you're in is revolved around science that's changing rapidly, changing really quickly. So how do you work as a company with a business model within an industry that's changing so quickly? How does that work for you?
Well, we feel like we don't necessarily have to be at the bleeding edge of whatever the new technologies are. We want them to stabilize, because we give individuals their data back. We have to feel very confident in the information that they're receiving. So it's better for us to just hold off a little bit, we think, and wait until the technology has really stabilized and we have high confidence, and we can charge, we think, a good price for it. So we look at it very much from the consumer angle, which is new for this technology. A lot of these, it's been used mostly in the research world with a different mindset. So we have to look at it very differently.
Now, you guys do look at it from the consumer angle, and that has caused, to some extent, some outcry from states. I know that California, for instance, at one point was saying you couldn't do it without authorization from a doctor. New York also asking you guys not to solicit individuals to want to get their genetic information. So it seems like the issue really is between actual prescriptive or diagnostic versus educational. That seems to be kind of the issue at stake here. Is that correct? Or talk to me a little bit about the issues the legal issues that you guys are having to come up against here.
Well, there was the very traditional genetics testing market that's been around for many years, decades actually, where we've understood the genetics of things like Mendelian disorders, cystic fibrosis, and there's a whole long list of more black and white genetics that have been offered up. And the world has shifted now to getting access to information that's more gray. We don't know. I don't know that you would even call it diagnostic to find out that your risk for type 2 diabetes is a bit higher than average. It's more informational. It's information that you could potentially use down the road for preventive purposes, but it's not like we're not going to be able to tell you, oh, you're going to get diabetes tomorrow or next week or next year. That's not how these bits of information really work. So we've created kind of a new paradigm, and a lot of laws oftentimes are built and written for existing technologies. And when new things come out, the laws have to be shifted to accommodate that.
Do you have a part of your company that's dedicated towards, I don't know, lobbying or working in that extent?
Well, we definitely are working with the Departments of Health in California and New York, and we have one of our scientists who's very much looking at the science as it applies to the policy and where things need to go. And particularly in California, we've been going to Sacramento. We've actually proposed a new bill, and we have a lobbyist that we're working with there. And it's really been great because it seems like California definitely wants to step up and see what they can do to help regulate this new field.
Quickly here, one thing you did was work with a California hospital center. This is a new thing where you're no longer offering it online, but you're actually offering it through a hospital. What led to that decision?
Well, actually, I think they approached us. There are clinical groups that are very innovative and really want to move to a preventive model, and they think genetics will play a big role in that. So we were very eager to work with this group in San Diego because they see the promise, I think, of where genetics can take them as a group to provide better services.
And you guys take a fee from that, I'm assuming, or how does that?
They offer the service at the same price, and we work out the finances of that.
And we'll be right back with more Venture. We're with Linda Avey, the co-founder of 23andMe. We're talking DNA. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. I'm here with Linda Avey, the co-founder of 23andMe. And we've been talking about your company, and I want to talk a little bit about just the investment side. Now, to begin the company, you had four main investors: Genentech, New Enterprise, MDV, and Google. And Google, interesting, gets a lot of attention from your company because your co-founder, Ms. Wojcicki, is married to Sergey Brin. So the first question being, did that cause any credibility issues for you guys when you got started? And how has that played into kind of the growth of your company and the financing of the company, obviously?
I don't think there was any question of credibility. I was actually quite happily surprised by how quickly, by how the conversation moved away from that topic, because people were so interested in what we actually do. So I think there was a little bit of a distraction at first, but it moved so fast to what is this company doing? Because what we're doing was so disruptive and new that it just changed the conversation almost immediately.
There's certainly been critics out there saying, Google wants to control the flow of information out there, and of course the next realm of information would be genetic information. So has there been any kind of expression to that extent that that's why they invested in you guys?
Well, there's always that question, but we remain very steadfast in our goal of being a very separate company. And what we want to do is give people options, give people choices of how their genetic data are used, whether it's, determining information that flows back to them, not maybe through the web, but it's a really big part of who you are. And if you can have that help direct the right information to you, then we're all for that. But we're all about giving you the choice rather than us making any decisions for you. But we're a very standalone company, and we...
So no plans to sell the company at any point soon?
No, we have no plans.
Now, you guys recently had a second offering trying to raise money. You raised $11 million, according to an SEC filing, of $24.2 million you were trying to raise. Was obviously the current environment, I'm sure, playing into that, but what does that mean for you guys right now? I mean, that was less than half of what you'd hoped to raise?
Oh, we're still in the process, and we'll meet that number. I mean, we're well on our way to that, so that's not in question really at this point.
Do you find the current environment harder to raise the money now?
Well, we were lucky. I think we've got very committed investors, and we kept the round within our existing A group. So we just felt like it was it was good to work with the people who really know the company and understand what we're doing. So it was fine.
Speaking of those committed investors, there is talk that one of your investors, MDV, actually sold its stake and went to a rival. Is that true?
It was, and that happened right away. So this, there was kind of a flare in the news. I won't go into the specifics of it, but we just felt like it was good to work with investors who were only investing in us and not our competitors. So we felt like it was better. We remain really friendly with MDV. We think they're a great VC firm, but they made decisions and we made decisions, and we all parted as friends. They're still really good friends of ours, but it's a very big field. And there's
it is a
lots
big field.
of opportunity.
Last quick question. I want to get it in before we go. 20 seconds. Expansion plans. You guys are in more than 50 countries. Any plans to expand out in other countries?
Absolutely, yes. We really need to keep moving out to other countries and other continents. And we worry a little bit about the language barrier. But as we can start translating the site, we'll definitely want to get out to more places.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Linda Avey of 23andMe. Join us for more next week on Venture. In the meantime, by the way, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Chris Valerio. Thanks for joining us.